People are often surprised to learn that one of the worst sins you can do is not doing the right thing. After teaching on the end times, Jesus teaches on the judgment, his final teaching to his disciples before he goes to the cross. And here in Matthew 24, verses 14 to the end of the chapter, Jesus gives two more parables. Remember, he's already done two other parables. These 4 or 5 parables that he has done here regarding the end times and judgment are really important for us. He's nailing it home that we need to be ready and that we need to be active in our faith, but also that we need to be doing the right things the right way with the right reasons, not just being busy acting out and doing things without actually having a transformed heart. He wants us to do the right things the right way. And again, this is highly important. We just don't do acts of service just to try to appease God. We do it because we love Him and we love His creation and we want to help those who could really use our help. Doing things the right way will be a major component into the way that we are going to be judged when we get to heaven. Not everybody's going to get the same reward in heaven. Heaven is going to be a society, as we're going to learn here again. And we will have roles in heaven, and those are going to be based upon our faithfulness here on the earth. Not our length of service, but how faithful we were along the way. And so we need to be prepared and ready, not just because we're going to be surprised at Jesus' return, but because we need to be ready to make sure that we are maximizing uh, our spiritual retirement in heaven forever. We make great pains in this world to be ready for retirement just in this life. And that's not even guaranteed to any of us. We might not make it to 65 or whenever that age is that we can retire. And but it's a given that we're going to be forever in heaven. So we should be spending much more effort on our faith and preparing for the afterlife than after work. So let's jump into the parable of the talents to see what Jesus would teach us about being faithful now and being ready for when Christ returns, and how this analogy works out in our life. So let's read together. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more bags. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of the servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here's what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well, then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have at least received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. So, this is a remarkable teaching. Jesus is teaching using earthly metaphors, analogies, stories to help us to understand things in the spirit. And so here we see that it seemed to be according to the ability of the person to which the master gave the amount of money to. So there's again putting God in that place is that He has given us a certain amount of talents and a certain amount of abilities that we can do, and He's given us a ministry that we can do according to our ability. So if you'll notice here, the 2 servants that did well, they both doubled their money, but they're given different amounts, suggests that the one who only received 2 couldn't quite handle maybe the same amount of money that the first one could. But they both received the same reward because they were both equally faithful. It says at once they went and put the money to work in some sort of business venture to which they either were able to cash out or bring back in when the master returned. So they have were then going to be rewarded greatly based upon their faithfulness. That they're going to be put in charge of many things. There's people going to be in charge. There's going to be leaders in heaven. There's going to be elders. There's going to be a society. And based upon how faithful we are, not necessarily how amazing the results were, because the results weren't as important as it was that they went out at once and they did and they made a return. They acted properly, they acted faithfully, and they're going to be rewarded according to that faithfulness. So that gives us some help to know that if there are rewards, that if you thought they were based upon what you actually were bringing in on a return, that someone who died young might seem like they're cursed because they don't have a lifetime to be able to earn those gifts. And but that's not the case at all. It is we are rewarded for the amount of faithfulness for the time that we live. We also learn that God is really generous and when he's giving out his rewards, and he doesn't mind there being unequal rewards. We need to wrap our head around this. Heaven is not going to be some sort of communist um, entity. We're all going to be better off than here, that's for sure. But nonetheless, there is going to be income equality in heaven, and we need to come to terms with that because God is someone who will lavish his gifts on people based upon it. So the currency of heaven is faithfulness. So let that be a spur to each of us to be able to use whatever gifts we have. If we're doing it with 100% faithfulness, then we'll be rewarded the same as someone who has achieved such spectacular results that we could never have imagined. And so with that, that helps us to know that if know that we're in the right place. There might be another place in this world that I could go to preach where more people might come to the faith. And if I was being rewarded based upon just that transactional, then I'd probably be motivated to go somewhere else for the wrong reason. But the fact is, you have to pray and ask God, where do you want me and how do you want me to serve? And I just want to try to be faithful. And as you do that, then no matter what the results, whether they're big or small, it's not really so much the results that matter. It's the heart to which we're doing it, the way we do things, and our faithfulness is more important than the end result. Then comes the tough part. The person who should have put the master's money to work doesn't do anything with it. Remember, the master has invested in his servants to be able to go and to make more money, which is going to be better for the entire kingdom because servants are paid for after what is earned. This landowner is fabulously wealthy. We're talking like millions and millions of dollars worth of gold in these bags that is being talked about. And so with that, this guy does nothing with it but hides it in the ground, which was a common way of storing something that was good that you were trying to save, because it's hard to dig up a whole field when a robber comes to try to steal from you because they don't know where it's actually buried. But if it's just in a jar or in a pot in your house, that's easy to find and steal. So it was a common thing in the ancient world to bury treasure to keep it away from prying eyes and prying hands. And which is why randomly when they do archaeological digs, they often find bags of gold or buckets of gold that are buried in the ground. And some people say, why would somebody bury that only to never find it again? Well, that was their bank. There was no banks like there are here today. And so this master invested. So it tells us that God's invested spiritual gifts in each of us, that he is expecting a return. And if he has invested in us and we have done nothing with that, he is going to get upset. Look how upset he got at this guy here. There's nothing here to indicate that this guy would somehow lose that money. And there also doesn't seem to be a worry of the master of if the guy had lost the money. The question here isn't about whether he gained or lost. It's about that this guy was faithful and lazy, is what God is putting here on this person. This is a person who has been gifted by God, has been given a reasonable expectation to go do something about that faith, but because of their misconceptions about God, because of whatever they can contrive in their own brain about God, to somehow thinking he's unjust. That's common in this world. People often lazily don't pay attention to who God really is and what he can do in their life. And it is a lazy thing to have a misconception of God, because the word of God is sharper than a double-edged sword, and we've had it underneath our noses for 2,000 years. It is lazy, spiritual, physical, everything lazy to have a misconception about God. And this is what Jesus is nailing down here with this guy here who makes in this wrong assumptions that produce sloth of fear and resentment towards that king, and even false information. So the king here it rebuffs by repeating it, saying, "So you said that I'm like this?" And then he points to it going, "No, no, no," and you know that's not true, because even if you thought that was true, you would have gone and put it off with the bankers, and they could have at least earned some passive interest. At least you would have gained something that was secure without fear of losing it. No, this wicked, lazy servant just didn't want to do anything to do with God's or this master's property. So this misconception got this guy booted out of heaven. And it says here where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So spiritual laziness, not doing what you know you ought to do. Even the bare minimum, you can show some sort of faith if this guy can show some sort of faith in the bankers, but still doesn't, then that tells you that that's a pretty a bad heart condition to be that against God. And so, there's a lot of people who have been gifted in this world and have misconceptions of God and are going to face a very steep and difficult judgment day when they get there because they have not done what God has asked them to do. I remember ages ago, decades ago, when I started reading the Bible, I came across the part where it said that those who teach will be judged twice as hard. And by that point, I kind of thought I might have been called to be at least an elder, a teacher in the church. And then what ended up happening was I was thinking, "Whoa, no way. I'm not going to sign up for a double judgment. I'm worried enough about just a regular judgment, not two." And then I got to this chapter, and then I was like, "Oh man, I'm going to be done either way." So it's like I just better become a good, faithful teacher and not hide my talent in the ground, because I will be judged very harshly if I did not do what God has asked me to do. So the sin of omission here, this is ranked up extraordinarily high on the list of immorality. Oftentimes we can list things like do not kill and stuff like that as really bad sins, but this apathy, this attitude against God, is something that is really, really a bad sin. The sin of omission, knowing the good we ought to do and then don't do it. Whew, that's a rough one. So in this parable, let us take encouragement that if we are faithful, that God will reward us in his own unique way. And also let it also take warning that God is serious about the things that he has invested in you and me, and he's going to come expecting to see, what have you done with what I have given you? And that is going to be, this is why the end is going to be dreadful for some and it's going to be amazing for others. There's no middle ground here. And all the talk on judgment and the end times, and there's never any middle ground given. It is one or the other. You're either in God's presence or you're cast out of his presence for eternity. That's it. There's no second chance after you die. There's no waiting room of heaven or hell. It's appointed unto man to die once and then face the judgment. And so this is why we need to be ready, because we need to be ready and we need to be diligent here in this world, because we don't know when that will come. And it's good that when the day that we meet Jesus, whether it be in a car accident that sends us to heaven or he returns, then we will immediately and surprisingly have to give an account. And it's better to live right so that when that happens, it'll go well with us. Let's go on to the sheep and the goats. And what does this parable say to us? Remember, Jesus just did a hard teaching, and then he's giving them story after story after story to help them to really realize the enormity of being ready and doing the right thing when you know the right thing to do. So let's read to the end of the chapter, verse 31 on, and we'll see what the Lord speaks to us. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne, and the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people from one another as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on the right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take up your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you came and invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? Or when did we see you as a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothed you? When did we see you in sick and in prison and go visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Then he'll say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, where the eternal fire has been prepared, and the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." They will also answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or stranger, or needing clothes, or sick, or in prison, and did not help you?" He will then reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. So again, this one has a lot of harkening back to the end of the book of Daniel, from chapter 7 to 12, talking about the Ancient of Days. The Son of Man will come and will reign, and then will divide up the people. Some will be raised when they come back to life to everlasting death, and to everlasting life, that God will separate into heaven and hell, which was the most concretely put down in the Old Testament in the book of Daniel, to which this is very much gleaning out of, even same verbiage. And so Jesus clearly here is the Son of Man, and the Father in heaven is the Father in heaven. And he's come to reward those who have been faithful and have done the right things the right way. And so as he goes on to explain, uh, helping the least of these brothers and sisters of mine. So that is to understand that these are the least, meaning the poorer of Jesus' disciples. So this does not mean the poor in general. This means the poor of Jesus' disciples, that he expected the disciples to look after one another. Yes, we will dispense mercy to the entire world, but it is incumbent upon us as Christians to make sure that we do look after our own, and that we do consider those in our assembly who are of little means and who are of little standard and standing in society, that we treat them with the same dignity and respect as we would our Father in heaven. That's an imperative right there. So the respect that we have for one another is to be across the board the same. And we're not to show favoritism. Whereas it's easy for disciples to want to invest in or to shower with gifts those of high standing, but nonetheless, Jesus here is saying that he really appreciates it when we look after the people who love him, who are of little standing and they need help, and then they get it. Conversely, he absolutely hates it when he knows that there is a Christian out there who is well resourced and sees another brother who is in a state that is very unredeemable in that guy's own ability, and that we don't help them. He gets really, really, really angry at this. Now, this is kind of also assuming, one, they're believers, two, that they're actually trying. There is a certain amount of, as the Apostle Paul told his followers, if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. So if you're poor because you're lazy, well, then that's not your brother's fault. That's your fault. And so what this is really getting at is things that are beyond people's ability to change. And so sometimes, but also there's the redemption side of it. Just because somebody might have tanked their finances, going to the casino or whatever that may be, doesn't mean that they don't deserve some sort of help. It might not be monetary help they need. Maybe it's more counseling that they need or healing. But nonetheless, we're supposed to help those who are down and out. But for those who do so for the wrong reasons, well, there needs to be a teaching time along the way. This, again, is not a communist statement to which everybody has to be given equally amongst everybody's things, but there shouldn't be a need amongst the Christians. And this is what Jesus is teaching here. And this is what happens in the book of Acts. So shortly, Jesus is on the cross and then ascends to heaven. And then Pentecost comes. And we learn in chapter 2 and chapter 4 of the book of Acts says that there was no need among them. For if anybody had need, somebody who had means would make sure that person got looked after. And that it also showed that all of the people that were considered disciples followed the apostles' teachings. So they did everything that they could in their own power, and the rest of the disciples helped to lift them up and make sure that there was no poverty amongst them. Now, this is not going to be, you're not going to be judged on one-off event that you might not have done the right thing. Again, this is talking about faithfulness and the status of our heart. If we somehow just miss an opportunity because we're too distracted by our daily lives, because life is tough, and we're distracted by all of our duties, that we might have missed somebody who was in need. And it's not getting after those one-off things. So we're not trying to heap guilt on you here or excessive worry. It should be the status of our heart. Do I want to help somebody? Am I willing to help, one of my brothers or sisters if they need help, if they stumble, if they fall, if bad times come their way? How can I stand with them? Because hopefully, if I do that, not only is this something that is praiseworthy from God, it's also a good insurance for your own self. Because what happens if something bad befalls you? Then you'll have a brother who loves you, who you have demonstrated some compassion to. It'll come full circle back on you. We reap what we sow. But we should do so, again, not just so that we have an insurance program in our back pocket, but to do so for the right reasons, that we see the image of God in his disciples. This is what he's saying here. Whatever you did for the least of these disciples of mine, you did for me. And so this is important to see that, that we are still image bearers, and God is very much paying attention to how we treat his image in each person. Now, we have to understand, too, that some of the bad times that have fallen on these people, like going to prison, meant disciples who were persecuted for their faith or wrongly accused. This is not talking about go give a cup of cold water to a murderer who's in prison. I mean, we can, but that's not what's in view here. I mean, we can certainly go and do good to anybody around the world, and we should. But when I say here, visited people in prison, that's not a command for us to do prison ministry for the sake of doing prison ministry. This was to protect the brothers and sisters, because often if you were thrown into jail, you didn't stay there long. So the judgments came fairly quickly. You're either beaten, fined, killed, or released was the common thing. So for somebody to remain chained usually meant there's some sort of political prisoner. There were some other ulterior motives going on there. for that person. That's why John the Baptist was chained and was eventually killed. And it's why, because Herod was looking for a bribe, so they kept him alive. And others that were arrested was only till they had their trial. And so oftentimes when people were stuck in either house arrest or a dungeon, would be their family and friends would have to be the ones to feed them because the authorities just would not provide food. And so if you knew a Christian who was falsely accused and they were thrown into prison, if you didn't help them, man, they'd starve to death. And so directly what's in view here is helping the disciple who has been thrown into jail for a wrong reason. And again, we can do prison ministry, we can do all this other stuff, but we can't rely on that particular verse for that. We're supposed to go preaching the gospel to the whole nation and doing good along the way. So again, just because it says here disciples, this is what he wants us to focus on. And that's the first place where we can start is we look at our local assembly and see like, okay, who might need some help amongst us? And we might need to um, give to the elders, and or you bring to me someone that you might know is struggling but has failed to indicate that, but you might be a friend to know. Please know if we ever do help anybody, we don't let the right hand know what the left hand is doing. We like to protect people's dignity even when they need some help. But if you do need some help, tell us that your friend needs help, or tell us that you need help. God has given us not a lot of resources, but we can make sure that you're not going to have anything bad happen to you. We love you, and this is what another important thing of us gathering together as an assembly. Yes, you can be a Christian and believe at home, but how can we fulfill this command if we live isolationist lives? We need to be involved in a community to either give or to receive, and it is such a blessing to do so if we have the right heart in the way that we do it. Remember, we're being judged on our faithfulness here. Do we really love the image of God? Do we love that person because God loves them? And this is how we can help everybody without showing favoritism. And so here in these last few verses, in these last few parables, even the ones I mentioned last week of the parable of the two servants, the one that didn't do what he was supposed to do, the parable of the 10 virgins, the 5 didn't get ready and they weren't prepared and they didn't do what they should do. Get the parable of the man who buried the coin. He didn't do what he should have done and he knew better. And now we have here the people who didn't look after God's people because they knew they should have, but they didn't do it. That this is why the sin of omission means like by not doing, that we know the good that we ought to do and we don't do it, sins, and God really hates that. And this is like really high up on his like bad behavior mark. And it's not just the big bad ones like stealing or killing that get up on that list, but knowing the good we ought to do and not doing it is a very, very serious thing here. And remember, these are the last things Jesus is saying before he gets arrested. This is the last teaching that he's leaving with them to say, here's how the end is going to happen. Here's what's going to happen at the end. You guys need to be prepared for judgment. And so when he's talking about this, you will have noticed that he, in all these chapters here from 24, 25 onward here, he's not talking about the particular sins that people do, that they commit. He's talking here about the ones that people omit. And this is what he leaves them with. This should tell us just how important that this is. This is why it's imperative for us to be faithful. So we do it for the right reasons. We ask God to transform our heart. That's why the book of Matthew, we call it the series on transformed. That God will transform our heart to want to do the right things and to want to do them in the right way. And if we can have that on our mind every time that we gather as Christians, every time that we have a Bible study, whether it's church or whether we're doing ministry here or out in the world, that is on our mind always. And this is how we plan, and this is what we do, is that we do things the right way, faithfully, and we encourage others to do the same. So thank you for coming to church with me today. I want you to just know this gospel message is going out throughout the whole world and is the most humanitarian thing we could ever do, is to let people know about the forgiveness of sins through Jesus Christ. God made the world perfect. Humanity botched it. This is why we see creation even groaning. It's not God's fault the way the world is. He made it perfect. We botched it. He has offered to fix it through his son. He's asked us to remain on the earth until his second coming so that everyone can hear. So we must be patient in this age where things seem to be falling apart and not trust in political leaders for our salvation or anyone for that matter, but that we rely and look forward to Jesus coming in power where he will fix all things and it will be paradise again. That is the gospel message. And if you trust Jesus for your salvation, that he died for you, then you'll be going there with me. And so I just encourage you that while we wait, that let's team up together and do some good in this world and make God proud. And let's make Jesus famous. Because when he's famous, people get saved and it brings God glory. Thank you for coming to church with me today. God bless you. Have a good one.
Let's do something together. life is better in community. So let me encourage you to reach out to us via the Connect card that you'll see in the description at the bottom of this video. That's your opportunity to just say hi, let us know you're watching, let us know how we can be praying for you, or maybe you have some questions about faith, about our church, or about life in general. We're here to help you, and we're happy to do so. I'd also like to thank those who are faithfully giving. I can't express my thanks enough. We're able to continue ministry in our community and abroad so wonderfully because of your faithfulness of giving the Lord's tithes and your offerings. So to go above and beyond his tithes is just incredible. And so for those of you who want to come and visit us, please know that our service is a gift to you. We never ask for anything from our guests. As a Christian, it is my act of worship to give to the Lord, and each one of us Christians believe that. So if you want to come check us out, there's no pressure. Just come on over. If you did want to give, we have simple ways. Give at regalchurch.com for your e-transfer, no password required. You can drop it in the offering plate on Sundays, or you can drop to the office through the week. Just pop in, say hello, and let us know who you are, and we'd be happy to chat with you. We can also set up automatic deposit. We'll just send you the simple form, and you fill it out and send it back, and it's good to go. So thanks for your time, and God bless you. Thank you.